The camera finds a smile before it finds the monster. In a fluorescent courtroom in Miami, the young man in a crisp suit turns slightly toward the gallery as flashbulbs burn white scars across the air. He raises his chin, lets the attention land, and for a heartbeat he looks exactly like what everyone once believed he was. Bright, articulate, promising. The room murmurs. Somewhere in that tide of voices, a woman whispers that he can't possibly be what they say he is. Across the railing, the defendant smiles again, as if the trial is a stage and he somehow is still in control. Outside, the heat lies heavy over the city. Reporters feed their opening lines into microphones. Satellite trucks blink red in the morning haze. By now, the name has eclipsed the face. Ted Bundy. It circulates through living rooms and dormitories and bus stops, a rumor-turned-headline turned national obsession. How could someone who looks like this, talks like this, carries himself like this, be the one behind a string of disappearances that turned fear into habit across the American West and South? People double-check their door locks. They study the stranger who offers help in a parking lot, the man with a sling on his arm who asks for a moment of their time. Inside, the prosecutor shuffles papers. The judge settles in. The defendant leans into the microphone and speaks with a calm that unsettles the room, correcting procedural details, citing case law, performing a version of himself polished by ambition and denial. He does not appear monstrous. He appears reasonable. That is the first cruelty in this story, and it is not a small one. In a different life, he might have been a lawyer arguing a closing statement. In this life, he will argue for something far more primal, the right to keep wearing the mask he crafted. The jurors watch. The cameras record. The nation learns a lesson it never wanted. Evil rarely announces itself with horns and fire. It wears a clean collar and a practiced smile, and it asks politely for your trust. This is not a story about a violent stranger lurking in an alley. It is the story of a performance how a man rehearsed charm until it looked like virtue, rehearsed confidence until it sounded like truth, and rehearsed our expectations of goodness until we mistook them for proof. The first chill is not what he did. The first chill is realizing how easily we believed he couldn't. Before the headlines, before the courtroom lights, there was a young man everyone thought they knew. Ted Bundy, born in Burlington, Vermont, raised in a polite, conservative family in Washington state. He was the kind of man mothers introduced to their daughters, soft-spoken, intelligent, ambitious. In the 1,970 seconds, America was entering a decade of change. College campuses were full of dreams of politics, equality, freedom. Ted Bundy fit right in. He studied psychology, volunteered for political campaigns, and even worked at a crisis hotline helping people who wanted to end their lives. Ironically, those who called that hotline described his voice as gentle, calm, reassuring, safe. It was a voice that could convince anyone to stay alive. He was handsome in a quiet, calculated way. His hair neatly parted, his smile practiced but natural. Professors called him brilliant. His friends called him trustworthy. He dated a woman from a wealthy family, Stephanie Brooks, who saw in him a potential husband, not a threat. To her, Ted was charming and ambitious, the kind of man who would go far. But beneath that polished surface, Bundy was already rehearsing something darker. He watched people study their patterns, their movements, their reactions. He was not learning empathy. He was learning how to imitate it. When Stephanie ended their relationship, something inside Bundy cracked. The rejection humiliated him. He realized how fragile his perfect man image was, how easily it could crumble. And that wound, that humiliation, became a spark that grew into obsession. After college, Bundy appeared to move on. He enrolled in law school, he worked for the Republican Party, he shook hands, wore suits, smiled for photographs. But the mask had begun to fuse to his face. He learned how to hide behind it completely. If you saw Ted Bundy in 1973, you'd never think twice. He held doors open. He remembered names. He had that rare ability to make you feel like you matter. That was his weapon, not a knife, not a gun. It was trust. Trust built carefully, over years, in classrooms, offices, and crowded campaign halls. Trust that would one day open car doors, follow him down quiet roads, and never return. The world saw a promising man, but behind that promise was a void, and it was waiting to be filled. Seattle, 1974. A quiet city on the edge of the Pacific Northwest, where the fog rolls in thick, and the nights stretch longer than they should. Women begin to disappear. At first, the cases seem random. College girls, all young, bright, independent. They vanished from parking lots, libraries, crowded campuses, as if the world simply swallowed them whole. There are no witnesses, no screams, no traces. Only an empty car, a dropped purse, a name on a missing persons list. But there was a pattern. They all trusted the same kind of man. Polite, educated, harmless. Ted Bundy learned early that the easiest way to take something was to make people offer it. He didn't chase. He invited. He would fake an injury, an arm in a cast, crutches under his shoulders, and ask for help lifting his books or carrying something to his car. The voice that once calmed suicidal strangers now disarmed young women. And when they leaned closer, willing to help, the door of the Volkswagen Beetle closed behind them. That old beige VW became his hunting ground, small, ordinary, invisible in plain sight. He had removed the passenger seat to make space for what would come next. He knew exactly how to vanish with someone inside. Each act made him bolder. He followed college campuses across Washington and Oregon, sometimes using different names, sometimes impersonating a police officer. His charm worked like anesthesia, numbing suspicion until it was too late. Outside, life in America went on. People read about the Vietnam War, Nixon, and Watergate. No one noticed the pattern, not yet. Bundy watched the headlines too, smiling quietly. The world was busy looking for corruption in Washington, not a killer in its own backyard. In private, he began collecting trophies, locks of hair, photographs, jewelry, not to remember his victims, but to possess them. He wasn't for rage or for lust. He was killed for control, to play God in a world that had once made him feel small. Each disappearance fed his illusion of power. Each smile he rehearsed in the mirror became more perfect, more detached. He knew exactly how much eye contact to hold, how long to pause before speaking, how to look like the kind of man no one would ever suspect. By the summer of 1974, Seattle was in panic. Women stopped walking alone. Parents warned daughters not to trust polite strangers, especially those with a cast or a Volkswagen. But Bundy had already moved on. His hunger was growing. He wanted not just victims, but recognition. He wanted the world to see him and still not believe. Because for Ted Bundy, the ultimate pleasure wasn't in killing. It was in knowing he could look you straight in the eyes, and you'd still think he was good. Winter, 1975. The air in Salt Lake City carries that thin, brittle quiet only snow can make. By now, Ted Bundy is miles away from Seattle, new city, new job, new victims. He's driving the same Volkswagen, the same careful smile, the same stories of a broken arm and a need for help. But his perfect performance is beginning to fracture. One night, a young woman named Carol Duranch walks out of a shopping mall and meets a man who introduces himself as Officer Roseland. He tells her that someone tried to break into her car. He's kind, polite, and confident, everything authority should sound like. He shows her a badge. She believes him. She gets in the car. Minutes later, she's fighting for her life. When Bundy pulls out the handcuffs, Carol kicks the door open and dies onto the road, screaming. A passing driver stops. She survives. For the first time, Bundy's charm fails him, and a living witness has seen his face. Detectives begin connecting the dots. Washington, Oregon, Utah, the disappearances line up like red pins on a map. They all mention the same thing, a man named Ted, driving a Volkswagen Beetle. When police finally find him, he's calm, collected, cooperative even. He sits through questioning like a man wrongly accused, polite to every officer, steady in every reply. He denies everything, and he does it well. But then the search warrant opens his car. Inside, Mask, a crowbar, handcuffs, rope, and that same cast he wore to look helpless. The evidence whispers louder than he does. Still, Bundy never cracks. He smiles for the mugshot as if it's another audition. To him, the arrest isn't an ending, it's a new stage. He escapes once, then again. In Aspen, he leaps from a courthouse window during a break in his trial. In Colorado, he saws through the ceiling of his cell and disappears into the night. For weeks, the country watches headlines that read like fiction. Law student turned fugitive. By the time they find him again, hundreds of miles away in Florida, more women are dead. He's thinner now, unshaven, desperate, but the eyes are the same. Still alive with that quiet arrogance. Still convinced he's smarter than everyone in the room. The net is finally closing, but Bundy treats every interrogation like a debate club. He analyzes the detective strategies, flirts with the reporters, adjusts his tie before the cameras roll. He wants to be seen. He wants to control the story. Every sociopath hides a truth they can't bear to face, that deep down they are ordinary. And Ted Bundy would rather become infamous than disappear into mediocrity. So as the evidence piles up, fingerprints, eyewitnesses, DNA, he clings tighter to the role he built. The charming, intelligent, misunderstood man. The smile doesn't fade, it hardens. And behind it, the real Ted Bundy begins to vanish, replaced by the myth he created. Because when you spend your life pretending to be good, one day you start believing the lie yourself. Florida, 1979. The courtroom smells of paper and flash powder. Cameras line the aisles. Reporters whisper, waiting for the show to start. And then Ted Bundy walks in dressed in a beige suit, smiling as though he's attending his own graduation. The murders at the Chi Omega sorority house are among the most brutal in American history. The evidence is overwhelming: fingerprints, bite marks, eyewitnesses. The state of Florida wants blood. But Bundy isn't afraid. He's performing. He refuses legal counsel and insists on representing himself. To the world, it looks arrogant. To Bund, it's strateg. He believes no one can sell the story of his innocence better than he can. He objects with precision, cross-examines witnesses with charm, and addresses the judge as if they're colleagues. Every move is calculated to keep the spotlight fixed on him. He even flirts with the female reporters in the front row, and some of them blush. Outside, the courthouse becomes a circus. Women travel from across the country to see him, some holding signs, others writing love letters. They call him handsome. They say he couldn't possibly have done those things. They want to believe in the illusion. Psychologists later gave it a name: hybristophilia, the attraction to those who commit horrific crimes. Bundy wasn't the first killer to inspire it, but he became its poster boy. He understood the dark hunger that runs through human curiosity, the need to look into evil and still find beauty. During cross-examination, Bundy turns toward the jury and smiles, as if he's the victim of a misunderstanding. He calls his ex-girlfriend to the stand, and in a twisted moment of theater, he asks her to marry him in court, invoking an obscure Florida law that recognizes such a statement as binding. She says yes. The audience gasps. He's not defending himself anymore. He's directing the scene. Judge Edward Cowart watches in disbelief. At the sentencing, he looks Bundy in the eye and says softly, "Take care of yourself, young man. I wish you had been a lawyer in my court." It's a line that sums up everything haunting about this case: the lingering sympathy, the refusal to see pure evil behind a polite face. Even in condemnation, people still spoke to him as if he were redeemable. Bundy is sentenced to death, but as he's led away, he turns, flashes one last grin at the cameras, and winks. That moment will be replayed on television for decades, the smirk of a man who turned his trial into a mirror, forcing the world to confront its own fascination with the darkness it pretends to fear. He wanted attention, and he got more than any killer in modern history, because by now, Ted Bundy wasn't a man anymore. He was a myth, one that America had built with its own curiosity, its own weakness for charm, its own hunger for spectacle. Florida State Prison, January 24th, 1989. The world is quiet, except for the low hum of generators and the shuffling of feet down a concrete hallway. Ted Bundy is 42 years old. The hair is thinner now, the face sharper, the arrogance faded to something hollow. Yet as the guards walk him to the electric chair, he still carries himself with that same unsettling calm, as if he's merely walking onto another stage. Outside the prison walls, hundreds of people are gathered in the night. Some hold signs that read, "Burn, Bundy, burn." Others cheer when the lights in the execution chamber flicker. For a moment, the air smells of celebration, the kind of macabre excitement that once made him famous. Even in death, he commands an audience. Inside, he sits down quietly. A leather strap crosses his chest. Another tightens around his jaw. He looks up and says, almost politely, "Tell my family and friends I love them." At 7:16 a.m., the switch is thrown. "Eplaining flesh," and the smile that once seduced a nation vanishes forever. When the news breaks, TV anchors read his name with a kind of relief, as if the story has finally reached its end. But it hasn't, because Bundy left something behind. He left a blueprint for every predator who hides behind normalcy, He proved that charisma can be deadlier than a weapon, that society's obsession with image can blind it to truth. He taught the world that monsters don't always lurk in the shadows. Sometimes they walk among us shaking hands, making jokes, looking perfectly ordinary. Years later, investigators still study his interviews. In his final days, Bundy spoke freely about control, about power, about his need to own his victims even after death. But there was one thing he never confessed. Why? The psychologists, the journalists, the believers, they all searched for the origin of the darkness. Was it childhood trauma? A broken heart? A chemical imbalance? The truth is simpler. Ted Bundy didn't kill because he was broken. He killed because he could. Cut to black. The narrator's voice drops to a whisper. He murdered at least 30 women, maybe more, but what he truly destroyed was our certainty, our faith that evil could be recognized at a glance. Pause it. Then, the closing line, evil doesn't wear horns. It wears a smile and waits for you to trust it. Fade out, soft static, the echo of flashbulbs in a courtroom long gone dark.